Pain, go away. Welcome to episode 2 of the Big Apple Battle, a New York baseball podcast. And today, Ed, we're talking March Madness. And no, it's not that kind of March Madness, but our kind of March Madness. And that is the countdown to baseball opening day. Of course, like clockwork, the injury bug has already kind of sunken its teeth into our New York baseball teams and has unfortunately officially arrived at spring training. So while we plan to cover a bunch on today's episode, the most pressing topic has to be the current injury situation. So, Ed, with that, welcome to episode 2. Say hello to the people, and then we're gonna get into some things.
Hello, people. No, it's March Madness. That is a great way to put it, Alec. And I'm just hoping that there are more Cinderella stories and not turning into pumpkins as we go along these next few weeks of spring training, and hopefully do it in the healthiest way possible because there might not be a lot of rain up here in the Northeast or down in the Sunshine State. But I'll tell you what, there's been a hell of a lot of pain.
Yeah, Ed, and you know what? Turning into pumpkins is one thing. I'd rather turn into Bubble Boy because with all these injuries going on, I feel like everyone's gonna have to be wrapped in duct tape, put in a bubble, and just hope for the best because this is getting ugly.
See, now the question is, are you the Travolta Bubble Boy or are you the Jake Gyllenhaal Bubble Boy?
Jake Gyllenhaal.
Okay, yeah, we gotta stay modern. Got it. For the
Exactly.
kids.
For the people. I'm a millennial. Come on now, Ed.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure the other one's the boy in the plastic bubble, not Bubble Boy. So, all right, well, we're getting nitpicky now. Let's get
Yeah.
into some
Yeah. All
baseball.
right.
How
Yeah.
about that?
Let's talk baseball now. We already got sidetracked, but
Baseball boys is what we're here for.
baseball boys. And you know what, Ed? With these injuries going on in camp, both camps across both the Bronx and Queens, I want to see how you feel about the Stankies' current injury situation,
How dare you?
and what your outlook is. So, without further ado, ladies first. Ed, this is how we're going to do it. We are going to rattle off some of our injury situations across both the Mets and Yankees, currently, in camp. And
You really have to. You just really like to make us, deal with all the pain we can possibly face.
I'm trying my best not to. Unfortunately, we have nothing positive. Well, no. Let me backtrack. There's positive stuff to talk about, but we got to highlight for the people the real time what's going on and what the outlook is, good or bad, right? So I know
Well,
it
it's a
sucks.
strong form of therapy, honestly. You got to face your issues head on. So I
Okay,
dig it, Alec. Thanks for bringing us
got
out of this hole.
got to be
No
present.
depression for us.
Got to face reality, and that's what we're doing here. Unfortunately, even if it's a tough reality, I know it is for the Yankees. We'll get into that. But so what I'm thinking is we go one for one by player, by injury, and just how we feel about it, and then we'll go from there. So
Are
Ed,
you injured or not? The great new game show brought to you by Big Apple Battle.
just call me Alex Trebek because we are getting this game show on the road. Ed,
Hey
let's hear it.
yo. So in the same spirit, we all know Celebrity Jeopardy was one of my favorite skits growing up. So maybe we can get a little Will Ferrell thing coming in here one day when we reach the peak fame, I
Maybe
should say.
he'll be a guest eventually. Mark that
There you
down.
go. There you go. I dig it. I dig it. So speaking of, you called us the Skankies, but I think right now we're the New York Crankies since we got a lot of cranky hips, joints, all kinds of things going
Mm.
on in our world. And I think we should lead off with the most obvious one, right? It's Garrett Cole. Nothing you can really do to come back from that. Not saying that the Yankees aren't going to bounce back and find somebody to fill in the role and fill the void. However, there's really no replacing Garrett Cole. He is the best pitcher of his generation. I don't think there's any denying or questioning it. He's the most consistent. He is the ace. He is the Roger Clemens of our time. There really aren't many people like him in the game. He is really a pitcher of what seems like a bygone era, a workhorse, an ace, and I just feel terrible for the guy because the way the last season ended, you really want to come back, hit the mound, have a strong season, and again rebound and get yourself over the hump to win that World Series. So losing Garrett Cole to this injury, a lot of fans have seen and commented on how the injury came about. Many people speculated that this might have gone on through the offseason and they were just hoping for the best for him to come back healthy. And he was trying to rehab in that way with rest and slowly ramping up. But who knows? That's not clear information, but it's at least out there. So,
Mm.
but the day it happened, he's on the mound. He gets pulled off after a rough couple batters, gives up a couple home runs, and then they send him back out there as spring training rules allow. Many fans worried that maybe that was the worst thing they could have done, and that's when the injury occurred. Again, seems like it might just be a confluence of both. Really devastating loss, but the Yankees are churning out pitchers year in, year out, and I do believe we'll have a way to fix this and address it. And I think, as we've seen with the Yankees, pitching hasn't been the greatest concern. It's really been the offensive consistency. So That said, you hate to see Cole go down, but it will come back healthy, and I have full confidence he will finish his career as strongly as he started it.
Ed, you're not very good at game shows because you've had the most important piece here.
What's that?
What tag are you slapping on Garrett Cole? Are you
Oh,
worried?
geez. I'm terrible at these things. You're right. I don't follow any rules. Am I worried? How concerned? I would say I'm concerned for the season, but long term, not.
Hmm.
Again, is it possible to replace a Garrett Cole? No. However, I do think we have a lot more pitching depth than most fans might be aware of. And again, it's why you don't get rid of a Marcus Stroman. It's why you don't get rid of what we considered excess players coming into this. So again, with Heel going down, who replaced Cole last year, we'll come back to that. It's a little tougher, but we have added some pieces, and I do believe we have gotten younger pitching talent coming up. So, as far as concern goes, I'll say moderate just because for this year it's tough, but moving forward, I don't feel like I'm that worried.
And you know what? You tend to see, for whatever reason, guys tend to bounce back pretty well, at least over the past few seasons, a better track record with bouncing back post Tommy John surgery and coming in stronger and looking more like themselves, right? So,
Totally. Yeah, once upon
2020,
a time, it might have been a death sentence, right?
exactly. Like right now, 2025, sure, it's a wash for Cole. But moving forward,
Right.
you do worry about his age, but again, we'll cross the bridge when we get there next year.
Absolutely. And the guy
um,
puts the effort in, man. So, I don't know. I just believe in these workhorse types. They are built different, right?
Yeah, and I wanted to push back so hard and just be like, he's not the best pitcher in baseball. But you know what? Over the past five seasons, is number one in WAR. Ahead of Zach Wheeler, Max Scherzer, Sandy Alcantara, Max Fried, Luis Castillo. A sub 3 ERA. He's reliable. He pitched 141 games starting in the past 5 seasons. I can't say a bad thing about him as bad as I want to. Maybe his voice pisses me off, but like a Patrick Mahomes. But at the same
Hey,
time,
Kermit has inspired this generation, okay?
like
Kermit the Frog had every reason for the greatness that we see today.
we're baseball fans, and I'm a baseball fan first, which is crazy to say, and I'm a
Baseball
diehard Met
pan.
baseball fan first, and I'm a diehard Mets fan second. So you have to give credit where credit's due. And yes, it's a tough loss. He's a great pitcher. With that, that's enough about the Stankies. Let's turn our attention to
The
the Mets,
Crankies. I
the
said it's the
Crankies,
Crankies. And he does it
Stankies,
on the
Crankies, Skankies. You said it all.
and he does it on the world's greatest sports stage, or at least the greatest stage in baseball. So that's another thing just to continue to defend my point. But you're
Fair.
right. Enough with my Crankies. Now you tell me what your first injury is and your level of concern.
Yeah, number one is my favorite Met, arguably, is Francisco Alvarez. He
Ooh, yeah.
fractured or broke a hamate or hamate. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. If a
Hamate bone, yep.
doctor listening, correct me. But a hamate bone
I
says to
can
be out.
confirm.
Thank you, Doctor Ed. So, expected to be out 6 to 8 weeks. Surgery was successful. But what worries me mostly about this, he's a young guy. Yes, maybe there's a better bone, a quicker recovery in terms of bone regeneration, or I'm sounding stupid now. Whatever it takes to get back to 100% health, it benefits to be younger, right? And what worries me truly though about this is he's turning into a player with a track record of injuries,
Yep.
and yeah, at such a young age. I mean, last year he missed some time, also a hand injury, but this was his thumb.
Right.
It's also just uncomfortable when it comes to a hand injury, and it's also concerning because he hurt this hamate bone just swinging the bat, a standard baseball
Mm,
activity that he prides himself in, right? That he is trying to
sure.
continue to prove that he could hit at the big league level consistently. And
Right.
maybe, I know he's tweaked his batting stance and where he holds his hands. I'm not sure if that plays a role, or it's just some freak underlying thing of how, the ball came off the bat, or how maybe his hand may have slipped on the bat. Who knows what it is and why? But it worries me
Right.
because baseball is such a mental game. And we saw it last year, right? After his injury, he didn't look the same. He was so inconsistent. And if he comes back and he heals this up 100% and it's, ready to go and he's cleared to play, I'm still worried that the mental hurdle is going to be tough for him to jump, to be able to get back to being confident in his approach at the plate, especially with a kind of a new approach that he was going to utilize heading into 2025. So with that,
Sure. Yeah.
I'm a cool, calm, and plain old worried.
Plain old worried seems perfectly reasonable, and especially for the hamate bone. We talked about this off air, but you know, Mark Teixeira a few years back. I mean, closer to a decade now since he's been retired for almost
Mm.
that long. He swung his bat too hard and he broke the hamate bone, and it's this little hook bone that goes into your wrist, and hooks onto another part of, again, keeps the wrist stable on the outside of your hand, I believe, or the outside part of your wrist. And with the way you swing the bat, with the way you're catching, especially for a catcher on the mental side too, as you mentioned, when you're having to deal with not only your injury but catching a pitching and a pitching staff thinking the way they think, thinking about your injury, not wanting to get hurt, but also wanting to be a gamer and play and
Hmm.
help your pitcher, right? But again, going back to Teixeira, the swing he couldn't get right for months after the fact. Even with the return and the timetable being 2 to 3 months, he couldn't get right. So my concern for you guys is that he's going to keep coming back, trying to work that wrist. He's trying to work out, which people do more than ever. He's catching, which he's using his hands, his thumbs, his wrists, everything more than most players are. So yeah, I do have concern for you too, and I would be
You know,
rightfully concerned as you are.
and you know what, Ed? You just gave me an additional point to this that I didn't add previously. Obviously, being a catcher and being someone who takes pride in his defense and tries to improve every year and takes pride in his pitch framing, it's the injuries in his non-throwing hand, so that's in his catching hand, right? And I think that just right there leads to potential risk of re-injury or re-aggravation of this. And yeah,
Absolutely.
man, I don't know how well he's going to be able to not only jump the mental hurdle of your approach at the plate, but also your approach behind the plate. So
Right.
with that, you just changed my answer on this game show, which we are allowed to do, and that now is more worried than before.
I have mission accomplished. I am very glad to have heard that. If
So
nothing else,
Ed,
I have achieved what I've set out to today.
exactly, and I knew that's what you were going for. You were trying to just make me more upset. That's all. That's all right.
Exactly. You got to sweat. You got to sweat.
Make him sweat. But Ed, I'm gonna pass the torch back to you. Let's try to rattle these off so we could get to how we're gonna fix these problems.
Yeah, good call. And this is no news to anyone at this juncture. Giancarlo Stanton, torn tendons in both
Mm.
elbows, and it's being attributed to a batting change, his stance change, and it apparently goes back to last year, the way he was holding the bat, the way he was swinging. We don't know if it ended the season in this much pain or if he had worked out in the offseason and possibly re-aggravated both issues. So something I'm always concerned with is overworking yourself as a baseball player. We talked about this in the past where baseball working out is not the same as a lot of other athletic sports. You need mobility, you need flexibility, and Stanton has always been very top heavy lifting, um, building that body where he is somebody that you look to have some sort of injury every year. So you're a little concerned every year, but you know you're probably going to be missing about 40 games regardless at this juncture in his career. So
Mm.
with this happening, it's very concerning in that I don't know what it means for his future. It's been very cryptic. He was sent back to New York at a time that people were talking, okay, should he even be there? Is there a point to being there? And I just have concern that there is more discussion about maybe career-ending surgery or the possibility that if he does rehab, that it won't get back to where he was to be able to play and continue his career. So Judge has said some things where he's hoping for the best, and I'm just hoping that this is an overreaction as a fan. But I've seen Stanton for many years, and it just seems like there's a slow breakdown um, that he can't really do much about to fix or slow. So we'll hope for the best, but I am concerned, but I'm not. Again, this is a two-part answer. I am extremely concerned for his career, but I am not overly concerned for the Yankees roster. I think it opens up some opportunity for people to DH to have some more roster flexibility with not having Giancarlo penciled in to the DH spot every single day. But I am extremely concerned for his well-being and his future and longevity. I want him to reach 500 home runs. It would be great for him to reach the Hall of Fame based on that. And he's just great for the game and a great clubhouse guy. So we want him there. Again, it's not about the season. I'm concerned for him, but I think for us, we're prepared for life without Stanton for now at least.
Yeah, I mean that's a tough injury, and the first guy I think of is Noah Syndergaard from to relate it back to the Mets in terms of like someone who decided to lift heavy and get away from calisthenics and
Right?
just looking to be more bulky versus more flexible and more
Yeah,
durable. And that led to a lot of injuries between 2017 and 2020 when Syndergaard was with the Mets, and that led to his kind of downfall, right? So
absolutely.
what worries me about Stanton is again his age and the opportunity to hit 500 home runs. I don't know if he's going to have that, but if he recovers from the injuries, you never know. I mean, he's proved us wrong before. Maybe he'll do it again.
And he's a monster in the playoffs. It would be devastating to not have that ability to go back to.
the silver lining to all of this, and we're going to get into it, I'm just foreshadowing here, is the fact that this opens the door, right, to the opportunity for some younger guys to take a crack at this thing, right, and have a shot at glory, right, have a chance to make the big league roster when maybe they weren't anticipating having a shot to do so. So once we get through this list, we'll get right back into, who's going to fill the void with these injuries going on. So Ed,
But
you ready to
now
pass it back?
I think it's your turn. Yeah, I was gonna say you're beating me to it, man. Give me a chance. I'll get it to you. All right. So
Sorry, I'm
eager, these
sorry.
Mets fans, all
Uh,
excited. You got
I'm,
one good thing happening at one time, and now all you got to do is talk and talk. And no, I'm kidding.
but you know what? I'm eager because we've been highlighting some negative shit, right? And we got to highlight
That is
something
true.
good, which is
That is true.
interesting because we're talking injuries. But my number two is AJ Minter. He had left
Hmm.
hip surgery in the offseason. We know, we signed him as a free agent in the offseason coming over from Atlanta, and he's just been a stud setup man for, throughout his career. I know I touched on him last episode and how high I am on him. So he had his first spring action today, and he threw one perfect inning, and he seems to be on track and ready for opening day. Maybe a week later, if anything. But honestly, I'm not concerned. And I think this guy's a workhorse. He's been durable his whole career, knock on wood. And he's gonna be a great set of man, ahead of Diaz in that bullpen. And the way Diaz even looked shaky in spring, and how we know Diaz could look shaky in the regular season, like I alluded to last week, AJ Minter is a great second option to maybe close out some games if Diaz struggles. So with that, Ed, I'm all wrapped up here. Passing your way.
You got the newly minted Met, and I've got somebody who's got a very similar name to a Mets player, in fact, that I've just learned myself today. A man by the name of Heel, Luis Angel Heel, which I only
Oh,
found out today, right? You got Luis Angel Acuna, and we got Luis Angel Heel. Your guy, your Luis Angel is heavenly healthy, and our Luis Angel is out with a high grade lat strain for 3 to 4 months.
fun fact, Ed, I did not know that was his full name.
Right? I found out today, so I had to throw it in there. It was
I
a
like
little
it.
long getting there, but I thought, Mets fans, you'd appreciate it. So, our rookie of the year, our pseudo ace from last season, will be out for the first 3 to 4 months this season. 3 months at minimum, probably 4 months after some rehab. And again, it's not great, not what you want, as Joe Girardi used to say. However, pitching, I do believe we have depth for. I have a feeling that we will find exactly who we need to step up and fill the void. However, that is just brazen confidence that I don't really necessarily believe I can keep backing up year after year after this continues to happen. But I would hope that the Yankees' investment in their pitching development does continue to come through. And again, I'm going to go with a very low worries, not really worried
I like it.
as a result, because I believe he's young, has great ability, and will be back and just as good as ever next season, or later in the season, I should say.
You
And
know
it will
what?
be like a mid-season acquisition, like Brian Cashman likes to say so much.
You know what? A lot of GMs do that, and I feel like the Mets do that as well. And you know what? It's not necessarily a bad way to look at things sometimes.
No, it's not. And listen, you got to come up with again the positive outlook, right? The silver linings. And if you don't, then you're just going to sit and wallow in your sorrows. So
Exactly.
you got to pick it up and next man up. So to that end, who do you got next on your list, my friend?
Next on my list is a bullpen guy. It's going to be Daniel Nunez. He came out of nowhere. I feel like this
Yeah.
happens every year for a couple, most teams, right? We have a no name reliever who's not really a highly touted prospect or high up in the farm who just comes up due to injury, and he proves himself that he's good enough to pitch in the bigs, right? And Daniel Nunez last year in 35 innings had a 2.31 ERA, 48 strikeouts, and a sub one whip at around a 0.91. So that's, well above the average, I would say. And that's in 25 games.
Wow.
The problem is, he had a strained right flexor tendon, whatever the fuck that is. Um, Again, not a doctor. Dr. Ed, I'll lean on you there.
It
But
usually tells you that you're probably going to need Tommy John surgery. It's usually the first indicator for
well,
any
that's not
team.
good.
Yeah, not what you
Well,
want to hear.
it doesn't sound like he does because he's on his way back.
No,
And
that's
the
good. So he
the
just needs some
word
rest.
the word is he should be ready for opening day or
All
shortly after,
right.
similar to Minter. So I'm gonna
There
hold
you
my
go.
breath because now you just scared me a little bit.
That's
I
what I'm
didn't
here for, baby.
I didn't yeah, again making me sweat because I didn't know that injury is one that tends to be a gateway to Tommy John. So praying to the baseball gods who have been cruel to us in the past. But
I
either
shouldn't say
way,
it's
Ed,
always going to. At least they just worry when they see it.
yeah,
So
well,
just
you changed my opinion
go
of the game again now. You know that?
ahead. Well, you're gonna get fired for your flip-flopping here, Alec
That's
Trebek.
fair.
I think they want some confidence from their show host.
Well, so originally I wasn't worried, and now I'm just again a cool, calm, worried.
Had a baby.
But I will pass back to you, Ed. And before I do, the thing I was going to say too, when you're talking about Luis and a hell heel,
Uh-huh.
it just reminded me, you're being so optimistic, and it made me feel like we were meant to do this together because you reminded me of a 2014 Mets fan. Super optimistic during the darkest periods.
Well, I was gonna say, funny enough, that's probably the last time we were in similar boats because 2014 Yankees fans were just as miserable. We were
That's
just watching
fair.
Derek Jeter retire in the meantime, and
But
it was
you
not a fun
had
time for either of us.
but you had your glory. I mean, it wasn't just 2014. The Mets, we had a 2009 to 2014 run. I mean, there's plenty of
Fair,
bad years to cover throughout this season in the dog days of
fair.
summer. We'll touch on some of the worst seasons of the Mets and Yankees history. That'll be a really sad episode. We'll get the tissues out and everything.
Well, that's the thing that we posted to the Instagram recently. It's the idea that lived through the 2013 Yankees. Don't
Mm,
tell me you're panicked about this team now. The 2013 Yankees had like Travis Hafner, Vernon
so
Wells,
bad.
Lyle Overbay, Ichiro, which all great players in their primes, but it was everybody that was past their prime. Jason Nix. Like I can go on and I remember this team and listening so intently to them on the radio, thinking, we can do it. We can shock the world. This team's good enough. It had
Yeah.
nothing. There was nothing going on.
That's like a
Everybody was hurt.
Wilpon ownership at that point. That's what it sounds like, signing these overpriced, outdated veterans. But you know what?
Totally.
We again, similar to the Mets, survived 2006, yeah, survived 2015,
We're survivors. New
survived
Yorkers.
2000. I mean, yeah, the list will go on, and we know about all that. So again, I will pass. Oh no, you're passing it to me again.
So no, no, it's back to me. All right. So I'm gonna go. We're gonna
Ed,
keep
I'm
this
blaming this
train
on
on.
recording too late at night. But you go.
We had too much preparation. That's the problem. We're too prepared. Um, no, so I think one is again another obvious one, and just feels like kind of Groundhog Day at this point with this guy, and it's unfortunate because I think all Yankee fans have a soft spot in their heart for him, and really want for him to get healthy, but it just seems like it's not going to happen, especially with his lower half, and that's DJ LeMahieu.
Hmm.
We discussed it last week. Can't get your legs underneath you; it's not going to work out well. It had been toe, calf, whatever it might be. I now think it's an ankle. Um, Hoping for the best. DJ, when he's at his best, is hitting line to line, keeps the line moving in that lineup. Going to use line, line, line one more time. But he's capable of doing what the Yankees need, which is breaking it up from purely seeking home runs or doubles, extra base hits. He's one of those guys that is from the old school mentality of, again, a line to line approach, line drives, don't lift the ball, don't beat it into the ground, actually just try to drive through the ball and again move the line down. And he's what made us go for so long. He was a bit like our engine, and since he's been unhealthy, we have not been able to find that piece to fill in a Luis Ariz type, right? One who just gets base knocks when you really need them. So
Hmm.
I'm extremely concerned for him once again, but not entirely surprised, and really just wishing that we could have somebody that would be a one-to-one replacement for the type of player he is when healthy. And I think we're looking to develop that with the Cabrera, Oswaldo Cabrera, with some of our infield prospects. Um, so again, not overly concerned. Gives us more opportunity, as we talked about, silver linings and more guys in the system that need to be showcased and given an opportunity to play. So again, more concerned for DJ, kind of a la Stanton. Makes me worry that it's coming to an end or that he's going to be released at some point because we just can't wait for him to get healthy anymore. So yeah, moderately concerned for us.
Hmm.
Not really at all, actually, I should say. Mostly concerned for the longevity of our boy DJ.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like, similar to Stanton, right? DJ is a guy who might be unfortunately past his prime, similar to like a Marte on the Mets, right? Where you're gonna have to find unique and new ways to utilize them.
Sure.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but either way, hoping for all the best. I mean, DJ was a legend in Colorado. Always liked him as a player. So you never want to wish poorly on a guy like that. So
No,
that's
and the
probably the
thing
nicest
about
thing I've said about the Yankees in a while. So there you go.
well, that was very kind of you. And the thing about Marte though is also he is still a freak physical specimen. He can
Yeah.
steal bags. He still does a lot of great things athletically. He just has, I think, almost he works out a little too much. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel like they're just like weird mystery leg injuries that are popping out of nowhere.
He wants to look good. Don't we all? While he's
Looks,
playing on live TV, you got to look good.
hey, you got some studly outfielders out there. That is for
Yeah.
sure.
And you know what? Speaking of outfielders, now here's a good segue, Ed.
Ah, yes.
Brandon Nimmo, a potential
Oh,
4 or 5
yeah.
hitter, a huge piece of this Mets team. Basically, part of this core soul of this team, right? And he's had
Right.
some right knee soreness flare up here in spring. He actually got a knee gel injection. I want to say last week, and he's playing now. He said his MRI, you know, it showed just inflammation, no structural damage, so that's always a good sign. But you never know. Sometimes an injury like that is going to linger, similar to his plantar fasciitis last year in his foot.
Right.
And again, he's an older guy, right? But I think the beauty here, not beauty, but again, silver lining is a better word, right? Is the outfield depth that we have now. Not just with the signing of Soto and Siri, you still have Tyrone Taylor out there. You have a guy like Jesse Winker who could fill in Marte here and there. You really don't want him in the outfield anymore. But it's still four or three or four quality candidates to take up time in the outfield. Even if Jeff McNeil, right? There's certain days that's the beauty of McNeil. He can play every position. So you could shift him into left field if Nimmo's DHing or needs an off day.
Ultimate
Um,
flexibility, man. That's all you need.
ultimate flexibility, man. So, yes, of course, I'm worried about Nimmo because he's older. He's a big piece of this Mets team if we want to go all the way. But again, he can be moved around and utilized in many different ways, whether it's DH, an off day here and there on back to backs and that sort of thing. So he doesn't need to play every day to be productive, in my opinion. But
Right.
I'm moderately worried because that is a thing where you tend to see a lingering issue is your knee, similar to like a hamstring, right, or your foot, or your hands, like we were talking about with Alvarez. So a little concerned. But again, Mendoza and the rest of the staff is talking very positively about it, and they tend to be pretty transparent, unlike maybe the Buck Showalter Mets, where they try to cover it up and not be as transparent and open and honest with their fans, especially in
Hey,
this.
don't you blame Buck. That's not his
I
fault. They
love
have a
Buck.
whole PR staff, all right?
I love Buck, but I really like the idea of just like why hide it, right? I understand New York media is cutthroat, but just be open and honest with your fans. I think it's the best way to go about it here, and it sounds like that's what they're doing. So hopefully that is the truth, and he's gonna be ready to go by opening day and just rest up a bit in spring. So with that, Ed,
There you
back to
go.
your Stankies.
The Crankies, how dare you? Clark Schmidt's got a cranky
Yes.
back. And I think that's where I'm probably going to leave it off because we got a couple of others that we can talk about where we got
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Loaisaga, we got Scott Efros coming back. Loaisaga's coming back from UCL surgery, missed all of last year. He'll be a huge weapon, so that's an exciting guy to look forward to coming back. Not really concerned, just happy. He's an absolute weapon, so stoked for that. He'll solidify our back end. And Efros, we traded Hayden Wisniewski to the Cubs for. He was a prospect of ours who's now with the Astros. Went over in the deal for Kyle Tucker, I believe. But Efros came over and had this like wipeout slide or crazy movement. Got hurt almost immediately for the Yankees, and we didn't really get a lot of him healthy last year. So he's another guy, not overly concerned. He's got a hamstring strain, so it might take him some time. But
Mm-hmm.
two guys that will, again, like midseason trades. Who knows when they come back? May. You'll just be happy to have them bolster your back end of your bullpen, I should say. But
Once
going back, it's Clark Schmidt with the back that is very concerning.
Sorry, I was just gonna say. I mean, again, you're being a very optimistic Yankee fan, and that's a good color on you. But when we get
Gotta be.
a little further into this, I want to touch on that rotation because I think there are question marks. Regardless, I got one more for you, and then we can wrap it up.
Give it to me. Absolutely.
And this is an obvious one in my opinion. Yeah, I could talk about Montas, but honestly, I don't really care about Montas. I'm still pissed that we didn't keep Severino, and I feel like I'm not alone in terms of that train of thought when talking for other Mets fans. But it's Sean
Frankie's
Manaea.
going to be your favorite. You're going to love Frankie eventually.
I mean, yeah,
Um,
if he's a mid-year acquisition, like you're saying, or you call him air quotes a mid-year acquisition, and he pitches to a sub four, I'll be happy. But
we'll
until
take it.
then, question marks all over it. But Sean Manaea
Absolutely.
is the big question mark. I mean, he's supposed to be the ace and the number one in our rotation this year with his strained right oblique. We're optimistic he's gonna be ready for April. He won't be ready for opening day, but he said he's feeling good and he's on track to start up a throwing program sooner than later. So I'm crossing my fingers, and that's where I'm leaving it. I'm not worried. I'm not worried. I'm just crossing my fingers because we're not going anywhere without Manaea in this rotation.
That's it. No,
That's it.
he's your linchpin for this season, and it's great that you have Holmes, and we talked about that. But yeah, he's the guy that's going to really lead and lead by example. And you need him. He's huge, and I need him because my fantasy team is coming back, my keeper league, and he
Oh,
crushed it for me last year. So I don't know if my team does anything without him. So selfishly, I'm going to hope for the best for him too.
and you know what? I'm going to be rooting for you because if I'm rooting for you, that means I'm rooting for him.
There you go. As long as it's up until playoffs when those don't matter anymore, then I can say you can go tank it. That's fine.
You know what? That's fine. At that point, I'll take that bad juju and I'll turn around and use it against you. So that's all right. But
Well, I
Ed,
appreciate you looking forward to giving it back to me somehow.
yeah, that's what we do here. That's why we're it's the battle between Queens and the Bronx. That's the whole point of this thing, right?
That's it. That's it, baby. All the supreme. I just, yeah, we'll come back to this another time. I've got some gripes about the Mets fans. So all the
Hmm.
talk you guys come
I'm
up
sure
with,
they want to hear. I'm sure
it's
we
too
all
soon.
want to hear
It's
these
too soon.
gripes. But yeah, it's too soon. Episode 2. Save that for a later date, Ed. But
That's it.
I know we rattled off the injuries, how we feel them. We didn't really give detail or context in how we think we are going to fill these voids, and for the time being, put a band-aid on these injuries, right?
Sure.
Because we have these guys on our team who are locks, right? Both sides of the
Hmm.
coin, Bronx and Queens. There's spots, of course, that are up in the air, whether it's going to be filled by a prospect or whether it's going to be filled by a savvy veteran who's fighting to rejuvenate their career. That's also up in the air. I do feel like the Yankees have more holes than the Mets do, but either way, we both have holes to fill. That's what she said. I just did it before you. I knew you were thinking it.
I was gonna say, if you have more holes, it just means that you are holier than us, I guess. I don't know
I,
what else to say.
I do apologize to any female listeners that we have tuning in this early in the pod.
How
But
dare
with that being said, I want to get a little granular here. I want to keep it brief, but I want to highlight one, and I'll pass it to you first. Highlight, some guys on this team who obviously are locks and the position isn't really being fought for. And then some positions that had question marks that you need to, fill with a roster spot. Who
you?
has a chance of making this roster? Because you guys are desperate to fill some starting pitching roles, some third base roles. What are we doing here?
I think the battles that we really have seen shake out most are backup catcher is obviously one we've talked about. Pitching has been a big one. Starters, we're going to need some guys to fill in, as we've already mentioned ad nauseum here, and corner outfield positions, I believe, or just backup bench pieces. So that said, we're going to need a DH without Stanton as well. All the things we've already discussed. I think JC Escada, who we've already discussed last week, um, has basically, if he hasn't already locked down that backup catcher position, I'd be shocked. He's hitting 370 so far, 16 total bases in spring training. Kind of a good way of just breaking down what these numbers look like is total bases, right? 370 sounds good or looks good, but maybe that's only a couple at bats. No, this is hitting 370 with 16 total bases, 10 hits and 27 at bats. He's drawn a couple walks. He's struck out 5 times, not a big deal, but a couple home runs, 6 RBIs, and 4 runs in 10 games. He's playing
Mm.
great defense. He's got the pop. He's older now, so he's got the minor league experience. He knows how to work with pitching staffs. Again, he worked with Yadi Molina all offseason in the Winter League, so he's really a guy that we talked about last week, and I think has absolutely locked up that backup catcher's position. And then we can go into some of the starting pitching, right? Will Warren continues to shine. 4 games, 3 starts, 3-0 with a 1.54 ERA, 12 strikeouts, 3 walks and 4 hits with a .60 WHIP in 11 innings pitched. So he's a guy that we talked about. Oh, maybe he calls up at some point, and you never know. Maybe he's still got to work on some pitches and the confidence at the major league level. I don't know. It kind of looks to me that what the Yankees have been seeing for a few years, he might have found that extra gear and could at this juncture break camp with the team if things shake out the way they're currently, where they don't, again, have anybody else that they really have confidence in. There's also Carlos Carrasco, former Met, right? Two earned
Mm-hmm.
runs in 7.2 innings pitched to a 2.35 ERA. So he's looking a little better, getting his strikeouts up. Some really interesting characters that I would have not expected to really make many waves in spring, at least out of pitching. And again, one other guy, Alan Winans, former
Oh, he used
Braves.
to, yeah, Braves.
Yep. So you've seen him. You have some familiarity. He's not a guy that you are, striking out a ton, really, but he's getting ground balls. He's getting guys to induce weak contact. So he's another guy that's got a .84 WHIP. He's got 1 earned run in 8 innings of work, 8 1/3 innings of work, 4 strikeouts, 6 hits, and a walk. So he's another guy who's got some big league experience with the Braves, who we know can develop pitching. And the Yankees are taking a chance on maybe rebuilding. And 3 guys that have legitimate chance to take a 5 spot, 4 spot.
I say, I mean, it might end up being 2 guys. And this is what I want to touch on for your rotation is like the way I had it penciled in before Clark Schmidt's injury was, when Cole went down, it's Fried, Rodon, Schmidt, Stroman, and Warren. And, Clark Schmidt, we know how back injuries could really mess with the pitcher and tend to linger. I mean, over the years, we have seen that happen time and time again to guys, like a Clayton Kershaw of the world. So, definitely a worry with Clark Schmidt. So, 2 out of the 5 guys you mentioned have a strong chance of being 4 and 5 in your rotation on opening day. So I guess, in your mind, who do you think has the best shot outside of Will Warren to take that last spot?
Right now, I would think Carrasco just because of the veteran presence and the ability that he has. Winans is younger, so if he continues down this, I think those two guys might be the final battle. I think Warren is my favorite right now. Again, just
Yep.
because he's part of the team, he's been called up already, and they want to see him continue. Um, and if he's hot, like let him eat. But Carrasco and Winans, I think it'll come down to those two guys, and I would say it's neck and neck. And really, what do they value more? Do they value the wily veteran, or do they value a guy who's maybe a little younger, a little less mileage on his arm? Um, my guess would be the little younger with a little less mileage, but it's easier to move on from the veteran who you might only need a couple starts out of, and then you can release him or trade him or move on. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But those three are the guys that I'm seeing as possibly emerging as front runners right now.
Yeah, and Cookie was a dependable Met. I mean, yeah, he had definitely some struggles over the back end of his Mets tenure. But again, he just took starts, right? He just went out there and pitched, which is what it seems like you need at least to start the season. And again,
Absolutely.
he may not be there for the whole year. So
And if
he
he
may
takes a
just
AAA gig at some point, that's depth, and
exactly.
sometimes they want more time to build up, and it's still, and you get an opt out at the end of May, and there's a good, right, opportunity for both sides to really assess what they've got and where they can go.
Exactly. So I think that's probably one of the biggest, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the biggest position question marks, right, is kind
Yeah,
of filling
suddenly
out the
it's
rest
all
of that
pitching right
rotation.
now.
But
Yep. Suddenly that was our strength and no one cared. It was all about third base, and now no one's talking about third base. It's all about our pitching.
do
So,
you want to talk about third base, or
uh,
do you think it's not worth it? You tell me.
no, listen, I think it's important. I think there's a couple other little, roles that I'm liking the way they're shaping up, but third
Yep.
base is tough. I don't know that we're going to find anybody outside of a trade or something like that, but I do believe that our roster construction for opening day could be shaped by some of these backup battles. So Dom Smith is doing a great job still, right? Hitting 318 with 14 total bases, a couple home runs. So he's somebody with some veteran presence. We're going to need a DH. He's somebody that can spell Goldie at first base a little bit. Um, but we also got corner outfield that we're worried about. You got Dominguez coming up, who hasn't been doing a great job defensively. Still needs time to work through that, but is obviously the hitting talent that we expect and the freak athlete that we've seen him to be. Just needs time to grow into that. But
Mm.
when we're short on players, what do? Everson Pereira is coming up. He's got a little more outfield ability. He's a top prospect. 13 total bases this spring, hitting 350, couple home runs. Guy that got hurt last year didn't really get back on track. So if you bring up him for opening day, you have more flexibility for, again, your roster for the DH spot, and you can do something a little kookier than what people would have expected from that opening day lineup. But we'll get back to that, and I'll discuss that a little bit more as we move forward. One more guy that we talked about last week, Alexander Vargas. Shortstop, could be an infield prospect. He's just tearing the cover off the ball, and I have to talk about him. He's got 19 total bases this spring. He's hitting 667 with 8 hits and 12 at bats and 3 home
Mm.
runs, 6 RBIs. We talked about him adding 10 miles per hour to his exit velo. He's clearly bulked up a little bit over the last couple of years, but he's got an ability to steal bases, hit for clearly a little bit of power, and to get on base. So if that guy continues to develop the way he is, it wouldn't be shocking to see him maybe up in the next year or two, or maybe even sometime this season, especially if you see, we're struggling defensively. We need young talent. We need a spark. This guy is shot up out of nowhere, and it just shows that anytime you can find that thing that clicks and makes you reach that next level.
Is he a part of your spring breakout roster? Do you know?
I do not believe he is. That's the interesting part.
Yeah, that is
So,
interesting. I mean, maybe he's just exceeding expectations overall, and he wasn't a highly touted prospect to even be
well,
considered
it's
for the spring
exactly.
breakout.
Exactly. And it seemed that he was coming into this season like, oh, he's got great athletic tools, but what is this guy? So,
Hmm.
it remains to be seen if this is a fluke, but right now it's looking pretty legitimate by virtue of how many reps he's gotten. And he's right now the second most total bases and the best average on the team in spring training.
I
You
mean, I
never
will
know.
say it is spring training. Take it with a grain of salt, but a lot of these guys are playing their ass off because they want to prove something outside of maybe veterans who have a secure spot. So, to
Right.
your point, it's not something to sneeze at. Those are some pretty impressive stats. So that'll be interesting to keep a tab on.
And speaking of spring breakout, we'll talk about some other guys that people are really high on from
Oh
spring
yeah.
training who don't even have the numbers nearly close to what Vargas is putting up. So, again, a little tease for that. But I'm done speaking, waxing poetic about all of the things and the many ways we can go with these young players who
Yeah,
are
and
looking to fill roles. But
I think
tell me
me
about your
and
battles.
yeah, I was
What are
gonna say I
you
think
battling?
I think me and all the other Mets fans, are kind of sick of hearing about the Yankees battles. No offense,
Listen,
you
you,
know.
you don't really have a choice. This was
Yeah,
your
you're right.
idea.
I shot myself in the foot by starting a podcast that we talk about both the Mets and the Yankees. So you know what? Shame on me, Ed.
Get wrecked.
So with that, I'll jump in to some position battles. There's really only a couple spots on the Mets roster that have openings. And first I want to start with our bullpen. Our bullpen is pretty much carved out and set in stone, I want to say, for the most part. I mean, yes, there's definitely still a handful of guys that have a chance to be, the last, take that last spot or two in the bullpen. Because again, I know I mentioned previously a guy like Daniel Nunez, optimistic they should be ready for opening day. But to Ed's point previously, he also might need Tommy John surgery. But
Don't
no,
put
no,
that
no,
out there. I'm
I
going to
don't
get
even
some
want.
weird sources. People are going to come after me for this. I've got nothing. I know nothing.
I had to do it to you, but no, I think to that point, regardless, the bullpen is pretty set when it comes to a guy like Diaz, Minter, Reed Garrett, Jose Budo, Ryan Stanek, Daniel Nunez, if he's back for opening day, so at least a spot or two maybe, and a guy like Max Kranick. I know I touched on him last week. He is tearing it up in spring. In 5 games, he's pitched 8 innings with 10 strikeouts. It hasn't allowed an earned run. I mean, I think this guy is pretty much a shoo-in to take a job in this bullpen, come opening day. I mean, there's other guys like a Genesis Cabrera, who's on the horizon for additional pitchers depth. Jose Urania, I know the Mets signed late for additional pitchers depth, but that guy is struggling immensely out of the gate in spring, even though I know he had a strong season, kind of a strong bounce back season when you're looking at his previous tenure in 2024 with the Texas Rangers.
This is the Jose Urania experience.
It sounds like it. It
You
sounds like
never know what
it's a
you're going to
roller
get.
coaster ride. So I don't know if I want this kind of guy in the bullpen or better yet in the rotation. Just depth, right? God forbid.
His nickname should be Box of Chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
I like that. I like that. Forrest Gump. But again, other position battles that I think we need to really touch on, and I think all the Mets fans are eager to hear about, is that super utility role. Jose Iglesias is out in San Diego now. He's enjoying and buddying up with Manny Machado. I know, with Manny Machado, he's singing "Oh My God." I saw him post Instagram with the "Oh My God" song over it. Very sad stuff. We're gonna miss him, but I wish him the best.
They're gonna beat you in the NLCS. Pods
No.
and 6.
Yeah, Pods are making the playoffs.
Oh,
no, I'm just pissed off about Jose being
catching
gone.
strays across coast. God,
am I bitter? Does it sound like I'm bitter? Maybe just a
wee bit. Just a wee bit, lad.
Regardless, we still have some options at super utility and some guys who are really tearing the cover off the ball in spring. And that's a guy named Brett Beatty, who I know I highlighted as a champion of AAA and a champion of spring training, but hasn't proven yet at the big league level. So it's no surprise that he's tearing it up in spring, hitting 370 with 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, and a 1.1 OPS. Again, I still have to see him be consistent at the big league level, but he's learned a few additional positions, taking reps at second base, even shortstop, played around the outfield. I mean, just kind of trying to make him into a Jeff McNeil-esque type player with more pop in his bat. So we'll see what Beatty could do. Luis Angel Acuna is another guy that has been in the conversation in terms of potentially
the other Luis Angel.
The other Luis Angel. The better Luis Angel. Well, we can't compare them, different positions, right? But I will say, Acuna came up like a ball on fire, late 2024 and was really killing it, tearing the cover off the ball. He wasn't expected to start with and break big league camp heading into 2025, just because I think he could still refine his skills at the AAA level. He's still young as well. He's only hitting like pedestrian numbers here in spring, around a 230 average, no home runs, 2 RBIs, and similar, amount of at bats to Brett Beatty. When he came up in 2024, he's hitting 308 with 3 home runs and 6 RBIs in a small sample size, of course. But that was during a peak time of year for the Mets with a lot of pressure on him playing in New York while they're making this run at the playoffs. So pretty impressive. And I think that shows a lot of grit, in my opinion. So he's definitely a guy to keep a close eye on. And of course, the genes, being Ronald Acuna's brother, is obviously nothing to sneeze at, as we know. And the last guy I want to touch on here is, everyone keeps forgetting about him, Ronnie Mauricio. He is a specimen, man, and he's only 23.
Yeah.
I know he tore his ACL. It's been a long road back, but when he came up, he was a highly touted prospect, and he was looking solid. I mean, I know he only had 250. It was 100 at bats, roughly 2 home runs, 9 RBIs. The OPS was sub 700, but again, he showed flashes of true, just natural power. He's got speed, and he has a pretty plus glove in the field. So if he comes back and he's healthy, he's young enough to make a full recovery. He's got to keep a close eye on, because he could be a DH of the future or second baseman of the future. time will tell there. But this is a battle that we're going to keep a close eye on. But I think right now, Beatty has the slight edge just because of his proven track record consistently, time and time again, in not only AAA and spring training. He's had the most reps at the big league level. And in a way, if he comes up and he performs well, it's a win-win because then the Mets might look to ship him or trade him if there's a need for another position come deadline time, right? Or come close to the deadline or later into the season because you just have a lot of good infield depth and a lot of good young guys in your farm that you might be able to ship Beatty out of there. And I'll be sad to see him go, but I'm hoping he just is
Yeah,
doing well.
that would be rough because I really felt like Beatty's never gotten the opportunity that he probably deserved, right? He's been touted for so long. I remember seeing him down on the farm in Brooklyn, going for a Luis Severino rehab start, actually. So it was Yankees, Mets, minor league. But Beatty was there, Alvarez was there, a lot of your young crop that's up now. But I remember Beatty being the guy people were most excited about. And it's almost like he's been squeezed by this depth, right? You got Vientos, you got Luis Angel Acuna, you've got Mauricio, you had McNeil, you've had all of this infield depth that seemingly came out of nowhere and just sort of blocked Beatty right when he was ready to make that jump.
Well,
I don't know if you
Ed,
see it the same way.
I actually would have to disagree respectfully, and I
You're
got
the
through
Mets fan, you better. Yeah.
I got through some stats at you here because Beatty was the one who was honestly shielding Mark Vientos and taking the reps away from him.
Mm.
Because Beatty from 2022 to 2024, he has a total of 540 at bats. 2023 alone, he had 350 at bats, which is a pretty strong sample size at 108 games, and he only had 212, and his OPS was a 598. So he had his chance, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And then 2024 came around. Obviously, Ventos was really starting to come into his own, a budding superstar. And was taking less reps, still at 150 at bats last year, 230, 4 home runs, 16 RBIs, and a 633 pedestrian OPS. And he had his chance. I mean, he did. 2023 was his chance to prove it. I know maybe one season isn't enough, but he's getting to that age now where it's kind of like you've proved at every level. Can you play at the big league level? And if you can't, you can't.
Right. Yeah.
So
And we can't keep waiting for you to figure it out.
it's a harsh reality, but what do we say? We're going to be present and real today. And unfortunately, Brett, it's your time.
Hey, that's
Prove
true.
it or
And
lose it.
poop or get off the pot, Brett.
That's it. And hey, I told you I have a graded 10 PSA rookie card for Brett Beatty for whatever reason because I was so high on him. And, wishing him the best and hoping for the best just to help out the best 2025 team any way he can. And I think he might feel like there's more pressure off of him to not be that starting third baseman, right? Where he feels
Right.
now that he could be more of that backup and perform at a higher level. So
Yeah, maybe in the shadows, he's like, oh, as you said, no pressure whatsoever. Vientos has got the spotlight. I'll just do my job. And if that's the case, maybe he does emerge again, and who knows? But I was just shocked to find out that they're only about a month apart in birth. I think Vientos is
yeah,
born December 11th, 1999, and
yep.
Beatty is November 13th, 99. So age isn't even that much of a factor. It's just Vientos is taking advantage of that opportunity and really running with it.
And they're also best friends. Fun fact, which makes sense
Oh, geez.
considering similar in age, played the minor league level, kind of
Go figure.
grown up together throughout the minor leagues. But again,
It's
man,
got to
like
be brutal. You're so happy for your friend, but it's also like, God, just go
eh,
away, man. Find
no,
somewhere else
it,
to
it
play.
it teaches you humility, right? I
That's true.
guess.
That's
But
true.
again, like Vientos had his chance. They both had a shot in 2023, but Vientos had more than half of the at bats, only like 200 plus. But he also hit 210. So 2024 was just kind of a budding superstar, kind of prove it out of nowhere year for Vientos. So that isn't a question mark because he really did show that he has what it takes, I think, to play at this level at a high level. So, just hope that carries over in 2025 and it's not a sophomore slump, but in a way, it would be because that was the most reps he had by far in 2024. So I guess we'll see what happens this year, but it's good to have a backup like Beatty then, just in case.
Good
Um,
problems.
and with that, the rest of the positions are in a pretty good spot when it comes to infield and outfield. I know there's some question marks in the backup catcher role, when talking about Alvarez going down previously. I know Torrens, claimed that starting job, and I do fully trust him in that starting role for the time being. He's a great leader of the pitching staff, plus glove. If he hits, I'll set the bar low. If he hits 230, I'm
Right.
happy. 240, I'm happy. But the backup role is up for grabs, and I thought it was worth mentioning. The Mets are going to look internally. If we look externally, it might be a guy like James McCann, a guy like Yasmani Grandal, coming in for a very
Lateral
minor,
moves. Yeah.
yeah, coming in for a minor kind of a backup role, right? Where they're not going to be here for the full year, might just kind of stop in.
Right.
But I think you kind of fill that void internally. It sounds like the way they're going. Like a guy like Jackson Reitz, I think is the front runner for that role. He's a kind of an average player in terms of both glove uh, and bat,
Right.
but he has had some experience in the majors. Not much experience, mind you, Ed. In 2014, he had a grand total of 14 at bats for the San Francisco Giants. But I will say the other options, Hayden Singer, Kevin Prada, and Chris Williams, all three combined have zero major league at bats. So one, Reitz has a little
Hmm.
more major league experience. Hayden Singer, not great at the plate, plus glove. Kevin Prada used to be a top catching prospect for us till Alvarez kind of came to fruition. Prada fell
Right.
off. His numbers in college were insane, but he has never proven at the minor league level. And then Chris Williams barely, he's going to be a DH one day, in my opinion. He's not a great catcher. He's a plus bat. He hits 20 plus home runs every year in the minors, but I think this guy Reitz runs away with it. But I think that's all the time I should be spending on a backup catcher role, a temporary backup catcher role, mind you.
Well, either way, it's just to throw in a quick two
Please.
cents. No matter what, I think it's a position that when you're filling, I think all you really need to hope for is somebody at this juncture is somebody that can command a staff well, works well with the pitchers, and looks good defensively, or at least doesn't embarrass himself, right? You need
Yes.
somebody that you don't need somebody to replace the home runs. You don't need somebody to replace anything offensively, really.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do feel like Alvarez, of course, there's really high upside on his ability to improve at the plate and be more consistent at the plate and really provide that pop that we know he can. And that you're not going to get from these guys. But again, how deep the lineup is this year with the additions of Soto and Siri and some of these guys that we're looking to have bounce back seasons as well as you're already,
Right.
shoe-ins and Lindor and Alonso. There's depth there that I think, regardless of what a backup catcher gives you, it's more about just managing the pitching staff. And that's why James McCann and Grandal could be good because veteran presence behind the plate is always good for a young pitcher. And that's kind of where I'm going to end at is starting pitching. Just real quick, I know I touched on Manaya and Montas kind of missing from this rotation to start the year. It's going to be Sanga, Clay Holmes, which but he looks absolutely amazing this spring
Dominating.
as a starter. I mean, all his pitches and his command and his just demeanor on the mound. I mean, he just looks so good. Again, spring, take it with a grain of salt. He's a reliever converted to starter. We know it's worked for many teams in the past. But let's see what he does in the regular season, in New York
Yeah,
as
no,
a
man.
starter.
Absolutely. And that's, I was going to say, we've
As
seen
a
what he does
starter.
in New
Yeah, we've
York.
seen what exactly.
No, it'll be really interesting to see if he can keep it up. And since the beginning, right? The first thing we said was he's going to be the most interesting, I think, person on your staff to see how he's deployed. I'm still shocked that he's a starter, but again, it's proving to be the right decision so far. So I'm excited to see how it goes. And he's a guy I'll always root for.
Yeah, and I mean, that top three in the rotation is set in terms of Sanga, um, Holmes, and Peterson. But yeah, the back end is open for a guy like McGill, Griffin Canning, or Paul Blackburn. I mean, obviously, two out of three of those guys are probably going to take that spot, and the other guy might be shifted to the bullpen, or he might be optioned if he has any option, or he's going to be DFA'd. So I
True.
guess we'll see. But a guy like Griffin Canning, who was making fun of all last episode so far in spring, 5 innings, 7 strikeouts, no earned runs. Again, spring, small sample size. But again, it's still worth noting when it comes to position battles because we saw a similar approach in terms of strong performance in spring in Paul Blackburn, who had 4 perfect innings the other day. But he was before that he had some rough goes. But at the same
Yeah,
time,
but it goes to
it's
show that you can't always brush off the dust or kick off the It just goes to show you can't brush off the rust that easily always. Once you
exactly.
get your momentum going, for all we know, that is the guy he's going to be a little more like, is the guy that is now showing, the best version of himself. You're always going to regress or progress to the mean.
And that's why it's called spring training because it's literally training, right? Pitchers are trying new stuff against actual players and
Exactly.
they're tweaking moves, they're trying new pitches, they're trying new things, they're trying new tempos and whatever it is, they're trying to work out the kinks, right? And work through the mental hurdle of the game throughout spring. So
And they're being encouraged to by their pitching staffs and the teams they play for, right? Like the teams know you're not going to do your best every time out here. We can tell, but we want you to try this, work it into your routine and see if this does pay dividends, after a few outings and once it becomes more second nature.
yeah, I can't agree more. And I know already talked about the Mets more than you talked about the Yankees. So now I know the Yankee fan is going to hate me. Um,
Well,
so
they
Ed,
already do, so it's
yeah,
nothing new.
that's fair. That is fair. I mean, hopefully, the more they listen to this pod, they just hate me more and more because that means I'm doing a doing something right.
Yes, great rage.
I did want to kind of take a pause here because I know the next thing we wanted to do was kind of get into the way too early opening day lineup predictions, some bold predictions on the first few weeks of the season, some quick, previews on the opening matchups of the first few weeks. But I feel like that deserves a part two. And I think the people might need some sleep.
Yeah, like I completely agree. We might have gotten a little carried away with this one today, but we do have a lot coming up on the horizon as the season rapidly approaches and as we see the rosters shape up to opening day. Roster cuts, obviously, final additions, trades, and anything that comes with that. But until then, we still have we have 2 weeks roughly until opening day. But in the meantime, the next couple of days, we have something that is a relatively new initiative, was introduced last year, and I think a lot of baseball fans are falling in love with it, and really has a lot to do with what we've been talking about. A lot of these younger guys who are maybe going to have some opportunities to fill in for these injured players, and that is the Spring Breakout tournament. Yankees, Mets fans, all baseball fans have an opportunity now to be introduced to a lot of the prospects in their systems, their top 30 prospects named by MLB Pipeline. And again, just the future of your franchises on full display in a competition format amongst themselves. So they get to play guys that have similar talent levels, and we get a real opportunity to see what these guys look like in those environments. Maybe not overthinking trying to make the big league rosters, just really feeling comfortable playing the game that they grew up playing. So, without further ado, I'd love to get your perspective on who the Mets are featuring in this year's Spring Breakout game or tournament, I should say.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm excited for this. I do think since this initiative has been implemented in spring, a lot of times, a lot of these top prospects, on these rosters are not playing in the game, which is a little disappointing. But I understand, obviously, risk of injury. Some guys who are fighting for a big league spot, even. So, a lot of these names might be unknown. Some of them are unranked, but I think that's the beauty of a spring breakout game is to shine the spotlight on guys that typically don't have a spotlight on them. So, with that being said, I think I'm just going to give you two of my top guys to look out for, and then I'll pass it back to you.
Sounds good.
So one most Mets fans should know his name is Jet Williams. He's the number 2 prospect in our system. He's the number 57 prospect on the MLB top 100 pipeline. And, I'm excited to see Jet. He had some injuries that hampered his minor league season last year. I mean, he's been a top prospect within this organization over the past few years that we foresee not only having a chance to compete for a second base potential role. I know that's kind of the only position on the infield that's really open over the next few years. Vientos slates himself in at third base. We know shortstop and first base are obviously occupied. But like Jet Williams, I think honestly he's gonna potentially move to the outfield. He's taken reps in center field. He's played center field. I think that's where they would look for him to end up shifting to, similar like a Drew Gilbert. Um, so yeah, I'm excited to see Jet play. He's had a pretty decent spring so far. I'm just gonna rattle off some numbers here for you because I know we're big numbers guys on this pod and we love talking
Oh yeah.
stats.
Oh
um,
yeah.
Jet Williams this spring, I mean, sorry, I was clearly thinking about the wrong guy. He's actually done nothing this spring. It doesn't mean that is the type of player he is. Again, take it with a grain of salt. He only had 11 at bats, and
You're nothing.
he's had 2 hits. So nothing to highlight there, but I'm excited to see him. He's only 21 years old and obviously has potential to be a true star in this organization. The next guy I wanted to touch on, going a little off script. I know there's a guy like Carson Benj, who's also the number 100 prospect on the MLB top 100 list. He's number 3 in our organization. There's also a guy like Ryan Clifford, who's number 4 in our organization. But I want to highlight a guy who is not ranked and not rated and get a little curious here because it's a guy probably no one's heard of is Simon Juan. And
Juan.
he's a 19-year-old signee out of the Dominican Republic. We signed him for around $1.9 million as an international free agent in 2022. And I'm just highlighting him because of how unknown he is. And I think that's the beauty of the spring breakout games, right? And how
Right.
good he's doing in spring. I mean, it's only 6 at bats, but it's 3 hits. And out of those 3 hits, he has 1 home run and 5 RBIs, and he's hitting 500. And I know it's super small of a sample
Mhm.
size, but that's why I'm excited to see what he could do in a spring breakout game against a similar talent pool, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so that's another guy that I'm curious to see what he could do. I mean, he's an outfielder. We have an influx of outfielders, but he's also only 19, so you wouldn't see him in the majors if ever. Um, Probably not until I'm closer to 35 years old. I don't want to mention that,
Oh,
but
just shut it. Can it, Canning.
canning.
Can it,
Um,
Griffin.
but you know what, Ed? Outside of that,
I didn't mean
I'm
to really shut you up. I'm sorry.
no. You know what? That you're doing your job because I think we gotta shut each other up at times on the pod, right? Um,
Yeah, or it's just a never-ending cycle of insane people just barking more stats and information at each other.
yeah, that's the beauty of it because we both are insane.
Yes, insane for baseball.
I mean, and just quick honorable mention is Jonah Tong, who's the number 6 prospect in our organization, who was tore it up at the double A level last year, and also has been just a strong starting pitcher in the Mets farm system over the past few years, and someone who I think is climbing the ranks relatively quickly. So want to keep a close eye on him as well. But with that, Ed, I'll pass it back to you. I mean, again, just looking forward for this game in general and to see some other guys that I might have just never really had tabs on.
Yeah, man, it's exciting. And I think that's where baseball for so long wasn't doing the best job. And it's nice to see them finally, really embracing the future, right?
Yep.
We never knew who was coming next. And I think that's what's so exciting about these games and this tournament. And for even just us as diehard fans who have to now look into these guys who aren't ranked and really familiarize ourselves with guys who will be on the list moving forward, but just haven't made it there yet. So it's really exciting, and it does get you excited for the future, especially when you got a team that can develop this talent in the way that we've seen the Yankees and Mets be able to in the last few years. So I'll give you a little bit what I'm excited to see from the Yankees prospects, and just mention a few names that maybe we haven't gotten a chance to hear all that much yet. So I'll start it off with some gas from the Hess station. Guy
Ooh,
named Ben Hess, number 4 pick, and
Hess truck.
right, exactly. He's back and better than ever. All right. So he's a big fella. He is a truck essentially, and I wouldn't be shocked if that became his nickname. He is 6'5" and 255, drafted 26th overall in 2024. Got an overpowering fastball and a strong slider combo. Gets a lot of comps with Lance Lynn,
Mm.
interestingly enough, probably for his body and his mound presence. But
So he
he's
has a gut.
He's a gut. He's a hefty fella, but just plus stuff all around. And again, a guy the Yankees are excited about. Hasn't done anything in the minor leagues yet. Didn't even really have a great last year in his time at Alabama, but he still is somebody that the Yankees are high on. And again, number 4 prospect, and we'll maybe just have our first chance to see him among any of this talent because once again, didn't really have any chance to play in the minor leagues last year after being drafted. So that leads me to George Lombard Jr., another pick of the 26th overall pick, but the year prior, 2023. We mentioned how we were talking about a guy earlier that Yankees fans were high on for having a couple mammoth blasts in spring training. And a lot of Yankee fans were clamoring to bring George Lombard Jr. up this year. But George Lombard Jr. isn't even 20 years old yet. He's 19, will be 20 in June. He made waves early, like I said, with these home runs and getting a lot of comps to Carlos Correa on his swing path and
Mm.
his finish. So that gets you excited. I mean, Yankee fans have a weird history with Carlos Correa, but I don't think anyone would deny having that caliber player on the field. So it gives a lot of excitement, but let's pump the brakes on his readiness. He was only hitting about 223 in spring training. Again, we know it's spring, but he's never gotten past the high A level. And as much as we've seen him be able to get on base with those first 2 years in the minors, or the low levels in the minors, with a 351 on base percentage across those 3 levels in 2 seasons, he still is only hitting about a collective 233. So we got to make sure that contact and that hit tool comes through a little better, not just the eye to get on base. So he'll probably start at Double A, but really exciting times, and especially when you're going to look at Anthony Volpe and the pressure that's coming on him. There's a lot waiting in the wings in the middle infield for the Yankees, so Volpe's going to have some pressure on him this season as well. I want to give 2 more just quick ones. Roderick Arias, he was also a 2022 international signing, but he signed for 4 million, double the amount that your guy did. So,
No, big baller.
just saying, he might be pretty good. No, but so far this spring training, he's hitting 375 with a double in 8 spring at bats. Not too shabby in limited sample size. And when he did play last year for Tampa, single A, he had 233 with a 335 on base. So he clearly can draw walks and get on with a nearly or with 100 points higher on his on base. Hit 13 home runs with 74 RBIs and 37 stolen bases. So this kid has great fielding ability, has speed, has power, is just waiting for it all to come together. And again, just turned 20 and is out of the Dominican Republic, number 7 in the Yankees prospect list. So those guys are coming for Volpe's spot, possibly, and it gives you a lot of excitement to have really athletic middle infielders in the come up. And I guess one last guy that's just sort of a dude that isn't ranked and nobody really talks about, I don't believe, except for the end of last season, is a guy named TJ Rumfield. He's a 12th round pick by the Yankees, and he is not ranked at all on our system. We don't have much of a future first base prospect to look at. He's kind of the guy right now that would be the dude to replace possibly Paul Goldschmidt next year if we don't make any bigger, splashier signings.
Big shoes to fill, Ed.
Big shoes to fill, and I'm not saying that he's going to, and I'm not saying that he's got that ability. Again, he's unranked. However, at AAA, Scranton Wilkes-Barre last year with the Rail Riders hit 292 with a 365 on base, 15 home runs, 71 RBIs, has the ability to clean up, profiles as that cleanup hitter with I would have to look more into his defensive numbers, but he's a guy that the Yankees are high on, especially with the way he finished last year. So, guys to look forward to, some high prospects, not so high prospects, but nonetheless, they're all going to be competing, and you'll have the ability to see them on the maybe not grandest stage, but you'll see them on the diamond, and hopefully they'll give shining bright, sterling performances.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, I feel like the beauty of this game, regardless of which prospects are playing in it, is just to see these guys again compete all at the same level and all kind of fighting for the same prize, right? Is to kind of show themselves off, right? And prove that they could play and compete at a high level and potentially be a big leaguer in the future. And yeah, I know a lot of these guys maybe aren't slated to be on the 2025 roster. Maybe, some of them could be fill-ins towards the back end if injuries occur. We get that. But majority of these guys, we're not going to see until later years of 26, 27, 28, and so on and so forth. So it's exciting because it's a foreshadowing of what's to come in the future.
And they'll be here before you know it. So, yeah, absolutely. Best to know them and familiarize yourself with them, and even just to know your trade chips, right?
Yeah,
Because
and when we see them, we'll have more back pain than we do now. So we'll be a couple of years older, but that's all right.
pain, go away. Come
Look at that
again
full
another
circle
day.
we've come, Ed. And I want to segue into a part two. We are going to give the people what they want, which is that early opening day predictions. I think we're at the time of spring now where we can start to give them. Some injuries are shaking out, some performances are shaking out. We're a couple weeks away from opening day, so I think the way too early opening day lineup predictions are always fun because then we can kind of see how that shakes out and how it looks when we're actually in season when we give additional predictions, right? So,
Oh yeah, ready for baseball, yeah.
I think that is a perfect time to wrap up this episode, part one, excuse me, of this episode of the Big Apple Battle. So, everybody, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts, and hit us up on Instagram if you want to join in the conversation. And as always, LGM.
Get wrecked, and we'll see you next week to talk more baseball in New York.
Catch you later.
This ball is crushed.